So I just finished my first year of college and I finally have time to develop Earthward again. But when I launched the game for the first time in a few months, I realized that, well, it kind of sucked. Even though it's still in early development, a lot of the core mechanics just didn't really feel right, and there was no sense of progression at all, which is super important for the kind of game that I'm making. The art style and general gameplay also felt way too similar to games like Magicite, which was obviously an inspiration when I was starting off, and it doesn't really have anything that makes it unique or stand out. There was a lot of bloating, which just kind of means content that doesn't really serve a purpose and is just sitting there. Another huge problem was, well, everything. The systems I made a while back just couldn't handle what I wanted anymore, and so everything was just like this nightmarish mosh pit of edge cases like everywhere in my code. There were so many bugs in the world generation, in the inventory, in the collisions, in the enchantments, and the attacking. So naturally, I pressed Ctrl A and delete on about 60% of the code in my game. Over 10,000 lines of code, months of work sent to the Shadow Realm. I won't miss them. And thus began the rebuilding process. The first thing I changed was the inventory. Before, making a new item slot was like 10 to 20 lines of code, and that's just for a basic item slot. That's not counting the special equipment slot or something for an NPC or shop, and I had to manually render each one. Nowadays though, each container is a struct that has a position on the screen as well as an item, and I made a ton of helper functions for just comparing, dragging, splitting, and doing basically every little thing I would ever want to do with a container or an item. It's a proper scalable interface now, and it doesn't want to make me knee my keyboard. Each container also has an item type, meaning a helmet slot can only fit a helmet, and a ring slot, and so on. They are also now automatically added to a global list upon creation, which means I can automatically render them if I mark them as open. So no headache for me. With my inventory fixed, I decided it was time to sort out the whole art situation. I made the huge decision to go hand-drawn instead of using spine like before. Funnily enough, it was actually easier to track each frame of the player animation manually than have it like I had before with attachments through spine. It also meant I could reuse this frame tracking code for the NPCs. I mean, just look at them wandering around. I properly drew all the tile sets, items, and even fixed the particles and enemies to have a more pixel-perfect feeling to them. Everything looks way more stylized now, and an unintended effect of having these drawn animations was that the game actually flowed better and played a little bit faster. This solved the huge pacing problem that I had before, where every action just felt super slow and drawn out. It's just nice to look at it and have it actually feel like a game now. Next on the list was world generation. This was definitely the buggiest part of Earthward. The older version had a ton of bloated and redundant logic, but the new one is like 10 times less buggier. You could say it lost some weight, put in that cardio. I simplified the algorithm and managed to boil it down to an essential 10 to 20 lines of code. Basically, the world is made of a preset of chunks, which I define myself using code. I can give each chunk a width, height, and a type, which determines what resources or platforms will be generated. There's always a start chunk and an ending chunk, and there's always enough resources to progress in the game. The same goes for biomes. Each biome has a size which is measured in chunks, and they each generate a different tile set. This means for a new area, all I have to do is create some new chunks and then add them to the selection list. It really is world gen made simple. I like towns, so I made one. Don't make this guy angry though, I think he's working through some personal problems. Since crafting in your inventory can get a little boring, you can craft certain items in towns, like armor and bars and just gear in general. I think it'd be weird if you could just make a helmet or backpack out of combining only 2 items, and it would be hard to make it work without having a bunch of pointless crafting trees, which is kind of what I had before, and I got rid of a bunch of items that were actually just one-offs, or just literally straight up useless. I'm looking at you, Lumber. Remember that guy who said he'd poison our family? Well, it turns out if you don't violently threaten him, he'll actually help you brew some potions. Some items are tagged as brewable, meaning they can be used in the cauldron and mixed to create potions. Each ingredient has a potion category and power. For example, the red mushroom is in the healing category and has a power of 0.5. Small healing potions require a healing power of at least 1, while rejuvenation potions require a healing power of at least 2. I'm not going to tell you all the recipes though, you'll have to figure it out for yourself. For those of you who have played Don't Starve Together, I'm realizing now it is very similar to how the crockpot works in that game. Oh, and I also had this idea for a recipe book, which stores all the recipes for potions and items that you found, and keeps them organized in this little interface for you. Granted, you can just ask the inspector what to do with something, but for a guy with a monocle, he's actually not that bright, and to be honest, I just like collecting stuff. Okay, well, I can't just give everything away in one video, or I have nothing to talk about for another month or so. Game dev while taking college classes and writing a book, more on that later, is very time-consuming work, okay? Cut all fish legs here some slack. Now, this is where I'd usually tell you to go and check out the Patreon, but I do way more stuff over on Discord now, and I just set up the whole subscription thing over there. So if you want early access to random clips and builds of Earthward, you can check it out in the Discord, which is linked in the description. Any support really helps motivate me to keep working. We'll just pretend it hasn't been 5 months since the last video. Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure to use your brain to send sensory input to the muscles in your fingers so you can apply a small amount of centripetal force onto your mouse and click the notification bell to be notified of upcoming videos. I really need to stop writing my video scripts at 12:30 in the morning.